I think what parents today are really getting right is the desire to really connect with their kids
Love
emotionally.
it.
That understanding your children and, raising them with warmth and empathy is going to create that connection that's going to make your child a wonderful human being.
And I
Yeah.
also think that parents today are in a wave of second guessing. I often see parents overanalyzing every decision, trying to do it all just right.
Parents today are so frightened that they're going to do the wrong thing.
Hmm.
And that's because they're bombarded with that. And I think my generation had so much less of that because we didn't have that wealth of information out there. I mean, I knew more than the average bear because I was a pediatrician. But nonetheless, I mean, there were a few parenting books out there that were good quality books. There were the occasional article in Parents Magazine. But the rest of it was from my friend group, fellow
Yeah.
parents going through this. So I don't know how a parent can't second guess because, they're turning their head each way and go, what do I do? I mean, it's decision paralysis.
Welcome back to the show. I am Dr. Mona, your online pediatrician friend, mom friend, here with another incredible guest on the podcast. And remember, if you love these conversations, you have to make sure that you hit that thumbs up sign, subscribe, because you are watching this on the YouTube channel, and we want to continue to bring amazing conversations here and can continue to bring more amazing videos to this channel. Today's guest is Dr. Flo Rosen, a board-certified pediatrician with over 40 years of experience supporting children and guiding parents through the ups and downs of early parenthood. She completed her pediatric residency in 1983. That is before I was born, which I think is going to be an amazing conversation. Okay, I'm an 85 baby, so we'll talk about that. And spent her career in private practice where she built lifelong relationships with families, which is what we do as pediatricians. Though she retired in 2022, Dr. Rosen continues to support new parents as Ask Bubbie on social media with features on ABC News, GMA, The Tamron Hall Show. Her proudest title, mom to 2 sons, and now Bubbie to her grandchildren. She lives in New Jersey with her husband of over 45 years, where she raised her family, many beloved dogs, and now shares her wisdom with love, humor, and heart. And she's joining me today to talk about modern parenting, what we're getting right and what we might be overthinking. And what an incredible conversation to have with a grandma, mom, and pediatrician who's practiced for over 40 years before I was born. Thank you so much for joining me. I know I'm just aging you, but this is an important conversation to talk about this parenting in the modern age. Thank you for joining me, Bubbie. I'm going to call you Bubbie for the rest of the conversation.
Of course. And thank you for that great intro. And honestly, I don't mind the aging so much, except that I think it's the experience and wisdom that counts.
It is exactly that. And that is why this conversation is so important, because it's not that this age or that. It's that with that 40 years, with the fact that you're now educating online, you are a grandma, a mom, you have a lot of education and wisdom to see the balanced approach to parenting. And I always say, I think modern parents get things right in many ways that maybe our generations above didn't, but we have forgotten a lot of the basic things that our parents did
Yeah.
that are very useful. So I love that we're going to have this sort of conversation. And you obviously retired in 2022. When did you start your platform online?
Well, it was actually 23, and
Nice.
it was right after my grandson was born.
Ah,
And my son and my daughter-in-law, who is very beloved, are very much social media people, and so everything got recorded. And I was demonstrating to them how to put Trent, my grandson, in a position for tummy time. And Trent put him in the position. He looked up at me and he rolled over. And as you know, 8-day-olds are not supposed to roll over. So I went a little nuts and said, it has to be a fluke. Babies don't do that. Let's just do this again. And I put him back in position and once again looked at me and totally rolled over. And I, like any grandmother, not pediatrician, but grandmother, went absolutely nuts. I was like, did you see that? Did you see what he did? He isn't supposed to do that. And my daughter-in-law got all of that on video and thought it was so hilarious that it had to be posted. And
Ah,
that video has now been seen over 30 million times. And
oh, I love that.
and she said to me, "We really need to do something with this." And I said, "Well, I always thought in retirement I would do, an advice column." And she looked at me and she said, "That's so old school. You're going on social media." And Ask Bubbie was born.
I love that origin story, and that is great. Obviously, I don't think I saw. Now I have to go back and look at the origin video. But yes, obviously, your content with the education you have with your grandchild, but also obviously on your own. I'm loving it. And I think that's such a great way to get into this world. And we're going to talk about this, right? Because you are obviously a practicing pediatrician for 40 years and now you're online. We are going to get to that sort of what did you learn from being online as a retired pediatrician, because
Oh.
I'm sure you've learned a lot. But I want to start this conversation with a positive thing. So, from your years in practice, what do you think that modern parents, and when I say modern parents, I'm saying like parents in this parenting age, okay? What
Sure.
are we really getting right? And what do you want to applaud in what we're doing?
I think what parents today are really getting right is the desire to really connect with their kids
Love
emotionally.
it.
I think they are very aware of children's feelings and particularly around toddlers, but there's just a tremendous understanding that you're not going to get what you want or create the children that you want by being rigid and authoritarian. That understanding your children and raising them with warmth and empathy is going to create that connection that's going to make your child a wonderful human being. And I think that
Love
this
it.
generation really gets that.
Do you see also a generational shift of in heterosexual couples? Do you see more father involvement than you think you saw when you were a pediatrician and who was bringing their kids into the office?
You know, I think it really changed
Mhm.
when I was having children. I think
Mm.
fathers were very much more in the picture then than they had been in the generation before that. So I don't know that fathers are necessarily more involved now, but I think what is different, and I think this actually kind of is the impetus for a lot of things. I think parents today are working incredibly hard. And most families, because of economic necessity, have both parents working full time.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly difficult. And I think then it's whoever has the slack in their schedule or the ability to do something jumps in. So I think there's more equality, but I don't necessarily think fathers are more involved than they would have wanted to be even 20 years ago. I think it's just the way things are.
Oh, I love that. And I think you actually segued beautifully into another question I had, which was I do agree that the economic realities have changed, right? Even with the inflation costs, salaries are not rising in
Oh, yeah.
proportion, the cost of
Housing
living,
costs.
housing, childcare. So you're right that that is going to dictate so many of the ways that we can show up for our kids compared to maybe 40 years ago. And I
Yeah.
also think that parents today are in a wave of second guessing. I often see parents over analyzing every decision, trying to do it all just right. Do you think parenting has truly become harder today? Or are we simply being harder on ourselves? Or do you think it's a combination of the two?
I think it's definitely a combination.
Mm, mhm.
I think parents today have it much harder. When I was raising my kids, you could have a very nice life on one salary. Yeah,
Yeah.
it took some sacrifice, but you could do it. And, I took off time after my kids were born. I worked part time afterwards. And you could do that because you knew in the future things were going to get better. I'm not so convinced that parents today believe that. They're
Yeah.
working incredibly hard. They have tremendous educational loans if they've pursued a profession, or a college degree. And I think that it's very hard for them to see that there's a way out from under all of this debt. So I do think parents today have it much, much harder. And just as a little aside with that, it kind of goes, and we should probably talk about this later in more depth, but the whole I don't know, bias, difficulty, whatever, between having grandparents help out or grandparents that are still working and living their lives. And I think the resentment there is real.
Mhm.
So I think that the realities of today really have made, parenting harder. I also think that parents are so much harder on themselves.
Yeah.
And I blame social media as the reason, and that for all of that. I think, it's hard to remember that what you see on social media, a lot of it is curated. A lot of it is the best moments of someone's life or the worst moments of someone's life. And it's not necessarily a real representation of what their day to day life is. And I think parents watching other parents that have the perfect answer of how to handle something, or, they manage to, have the child doing the perfect thing. I mean, I remember one video has a child using utensils perfectly at 11 months. Well, that's great, but that's
Wonderful.
not
Yeah.
typical. And so any parent who had a child over 11 months was saying, well, why isn't my kid doing that? So I think social media has made it so much harder. And I think the other aspect of social media is that you have so many people expressing their opinions, some of whom have education behind it or experience behind it, and others who really don't. They're just expressing their opinion, but you can have conflicting opinions,
Yeah.
and you have two people that are presenting a perfectly reasonable case, and yet they're saying the exact opposite thing. So I don't know how a parent can't second guess, because they're turning their head each way and go, what do I do? I mean, it's decision paralysis.
Oh, I feel that, and an interesting perspective for me is that since I'm a pediatrician and I'm on social, and I have mentioned, obviously I was a pediatrician for 5 years before becoming a mom and really building my platform. I have the experience of knowing what I used to give advice on, and then I came on social and I started to see all this stuff, right? And I'm like, "Oh my god, like what are people saying out there?" And like you said, to your point, some of them have credentials, many of them are just using personal experiences to give
Yeah.
parenting guidance. And not to
Yeah.
say that that's invaluable, like a mom of 5 giving their personal experience on 5 different children. But until you have seen a lot of different children and know that there's different temperaments, there's neurodiversity, that there's no one size fits all, even as a pediatrician, that took me a few years to build, right? Like I wasn't the pediatrician I
Yeah.
was 1 year out as I was 10-year out, because I got more volume of experiences. And that comparison, that feeling of like, why is that person doing well? But also that education. I think what's happening that I feel is a lot of my peers are losing that intuition. And I talk about this a lot. Like, I do believe that we have intuition as parents, but I believe when we start comparing ourselves with others, when we start listening to too many people, we forget to learn that so much of parenting is learning as you go, is sitting on a value system and saying, you know
Yeah.
what? I need to learn as I go, and I may not have all the answers every given moment. And if I need it, I can get help. But I think we have become such an instant gratification society that we need to have the answer immediately. And I need to know what to do if my kid now refused a nap. I need to know what to do now when, hey, maybe you need someone telling you what's normal and that it's okay. And let's look at the big picture. And we've become very focused, like hyper focused. And I think that's kind of ruining us in many ways.
Well, I think that's true, but I also think that affects pediatrics,
Hmm.
because I think you can learn everything from the books. Then when you go into practice, you learn from your parents. I mean, you
Yeah.
really learn what they're going through. And then when you're a parent yourself, you realize, well, you may have been taught that this is the right way to do something, but it may not be right for your child if their temperament doesn't fit that. And so I think that being a parent really changes your perspective on how to handle things. And I think that it's how to handle pediatric things as well.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to find, if I could say with the benefit of hindsight, that the way you practice and the way you approach a lot of different scenarios really evolves over time. Not just because you've seen so many more kids, but because you've experienced so much more of it yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that. I love that insight, right? I think so much of that insight is so good for not only just professionals or mothers, but just as human beings to say, hey, I love this. I can always grow. I can always see what doesn't work and take what does. And, the first question I asked you is what is some things that you think that modern parents are doing right? To frame the second question, modern parenting has definitely evolved. We've moved away from spanking, rigid rules, and because I said so, but are there any tools, habits, or even mindsets from the past that you feel that maybe we've thrown away a little too quickly, that you wish that more parents can bring this sort of value or mentality into the modern age of parenting so that maybe they can find more joy and peace in their experience?
Yeah, and it's funny because some of that really revolves around being a grandmother.
Mm,
I think that parents today are so frightened that they're going to do the wrong thing.
mhm.
And that's because they're bombarded with that. And I think my generation had so much less of that because we didn't have that wealth of information out there. I mean, I knew more than the average bear because I was a pediatrician. But nonetheless, I mean, there were a few parenting books out there that were good quality books. There were the occasional article in Parents Magazine. But the rest of it was from my friend group, fellow
Yeah.
parents going through this. So I think grandparents have a very different perspective, part of which is great because they say, oh, this too shall pass. This is a stage, don't make yourself crazy over this because this is going to resolve itself. Um, I think that's very helpful. It's to say, look, there's a million ways this could be done, a million ways to approach it, but this is just one tiny little grain of sand out of everything. But the flip side of all of that is that grandparents uh, are dismissive of parents
Mm,
because they're very skeptical about all these studies and all these different videos and all these different rules that are telling you to do different things. And there's a tremendous amount of survivor bias.
yeah.
Grandparents will say, well, I raised you okay, so, I don't need to follow this. Well, obviously, if it comes to putting a child in an empty crib or putting a child in their car seat correctly, those are really important things that we've learned that grandparents didn't know. So there's a fine balance, I think, between what you keep from the past and how you evolve with what we know now.
Oh, I love that example, and that I think is a lot of frustration with my peers in our generation, and obviously many of us, have parents in our parents in our lives, and that friction that can happen, and that sort of I know, and I also want to have the chance to learn, and and you want to teach me, and I feel like this information overload, and again, that parent is now dealing with not only information from the internet, maybe information from their doctor, and information from a parent of theirs, a grandparent that could conflict. And so then you're like, what is right? Like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm
Yeah.
curious, when you became a grandparent and you were helping it was your son's son, right? Your grandson
Hmm.
from, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were helping them, were there any moments that you had to kind of take that step back and say, I need to let them do what they need to do? Or did you find that they were very receptive of all the wisdom that you had?
Both.
Okay, I'm
Uh,
curious what I'm and so now my question is,
um,
I'm curious what was the more, I guess I should kinda question this a little bit, and what were the more like, "Oh, yeah, Bubbie, like, we love that advice." Like, what were those 2, 2 examples? Yeah.
Look, I'm going to be honest. Being a Jewish grandmother, and a pediatrician, it's exceedingly hard for me to keep my mouth closed. Luckily, my daughter-in-law is just wonderful and very open to listening to
Love
it.
it.
My son kind of rolls his eyes, but I think I can make suggestions. It doesn't mean they always follow them.
Right.
But when they really need help, they'll turn to me. And not to open a can of worms, but the perfect example was I tried to get them to get Trent into a pattern and get down to bed, none of that worked. And finally, they called me up in tears. He was 14 months old, not sleeping. They weren't sleeping. They were walking zombies and both had to work. And it was like, you have to come and sleep trade them.
You're like,
So
"Here, there we go."
yeah. So that's what I did. And I think that, when push comes to shove, I think they really do appreciate having a resource they can ask. But I think most of the time, I mean, normally I would say to a grandparent, you can make a suggestion once. If they don't listen to it, bite your tongue. I maybe say it 2 or 3 times, but then I do bite my tongue.
But I think you get the 2 or 3 times because you have the wisdom of the 40 years experience with other children too. So I'm gonna say that as a pediatrician grandma, I would also give you a 3-strike rule for sure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Because I know me and my husband know that when like, if our children decide to have children, whatever it ends up being, that yeah, I mean, that's gonna be a very interesting world for me, right? I mean, now I'm online
Yeah.
creating for others. I'm practicing pediatrician, and now my kids are gonna have, if they end up having their own kids down the line, it's gonna be like that balance of how much am I gonna share? What do they need? When do they need me?
Yeah.
And I love that you found that perfect balance in your real life. And then in comes social media, which is a whole new ballgame for you. And
Yeah.
I think we had talked, well, before
Is
we
it?
started this recording, you had mentioned like the things that kind of opened your eyes. So I'm curious, what about social media made you go, oh my gosh, what is happening? What about it did you like? What messaging was out there that you still are like, can we just let go of this messaging because it's harmful or maybe it's not serving us well? I'd love to hear just your feelings about being a practicing or a retired pediatrician now on social media.
Well, I have to tell you, my dearly beloved Aunt Rachel was an immigrant, and when she came over, knew absolutely no English.
Mhm.
And she literally plopped herself in front of the television and she learned perfect English and American culture.
Oh,
And she always said that the television was such an incredible medium for education if used correctly.
I love that.
And that's how I view social media. Social media has the ability to reach millions, millions in a way that I couldn't reach millions in my office.
Mhm.
In my office, it was me and my, patients in my
Yep.
practice. And I know I made a very big difference to lots of people because I know they made a very big difference to me. But that was a small cohort of people. Social media opens that up to the entire world. And I have literally been contacted from every continent except Antarctica. I was recognized in the LA airport by someone from Sydney.
Yeah.
It's astounding what the reach of social media is. So in that sense, I think social media is just an incredibly profound way to educate people. What I find disturbing about social media is that it's like the Wild West.
Yeah.
There are absolutely no safeguards in place. None.
Yeah.
You can see absolutely horrible advice online. You can see people saying horrific things. People don't feel at all compelled to be kind and respectful because they're not seeing someone face to face.
Right.
Particularly on TikTok, they have different names, so you don't even know who they are. And I think people can give absolutely horrific, horrific advice. There can be very good advice, but there can also be terrible advice. And the problem is being able to separate the two and assess it. And what's really upsetting to me as a pediatrician, and I know from your videos you certainly share this view, the misinformation surrounding vaccines and even surrounding what pediatricians do
Yeah.
is just so horrible and so far from reality. And it really upsets me that because somebody can have a soapbox on social media, they can take one little fact, distort it completely, take it totally out of context, and just run with it. And that can be viewed by millions that say, oh, I didn't know that. And that's just terrifying to me.
So you're telling me that you still have not gotten your big pharma paychecks that they tell us that people say that we get for giving vaccines?
Never
Sarcasm
saw
noted.
one.
Oh
Yes,
my
never
gosh.
saw
If
one.
you're not sensing the sarcasm, guys, obviously Dr. Bubbie has been a retired pediatrician. She herself has never received any payout. I'm a currently practicing pediatrician. That one is not dying. And every time someone sends it to me, I'm like, how many videos do I need to create on this? And without having to show you my pay stub, because I will never show my pay stub only because I think that just gives them more like, oh, look at her. She's trying to do that. And nor should I have to.
Yeah,
Like, this is my pay stub. Like, I don't need to show, but like, it's so infuriating. And that is absolutely a concern that there's so much soapboxing of this horrible misinformation around stuff that can be also life or death. Like, meaning
yeah.
negative misinformation around vaccinations and not having the balanced discussions that me and you used to have for decades. And you, I would like to just allude to this, you have been an example of someone who's seen the power of vaccine programs.
Oh, I have told this story repeatedly, but it is so true. I did my residency at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and they used to have 12 bed wards, baby ward,
Mhm.
they had all these different wards. All 12 beds would be filled with somebody with H flu disease, Haemophilus
Yeah.
influenza, which caused epiglottitis. It caused osteomyelitis, an infection of the bone. It caused sepsis. And those kids all left blind,
Yes.
deaf, or
Yes.
missing a limb. It was horrific. And I remember seeing that all through my residency and just being devastated that these kids were coming in and we were trying our best, giving the right antibiotics, but if we got them in too late, they didn't come to the hospital quickly enough because
Yeah.
parents thought they were getting better. There was nothing we could do. And it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Well, the Haemophilus influenza shot, the Hib shot, came out, I believe it was 1982 or 3. My first one was born in 83. I couldn't wait for him to be old
Yeah.
enough to get that shot. I mean, I just couldn't wait. I was counting the days. And within a very short time, 5 years, certainly 10 at most, H flu disease was wiped out. We
Amazing.
no
Yeah.
longer saw it. I doubt you saw a case of epiglottitis in your residency.
Exactly. And that's an example of the power of vaccination, which is, again, misinformation out there that we don't need these. We don't see them. Well, guess what? We don't see them because vaccines did their job. So thank you,
Well,
vaccines.
exactly. And what really upsets me are
Mhm.
when parents say they don't need to vaccinate their child because that disease doesn't exist anymore. Well, quite honestly, not to quote somebody, but that's relying on the kindness of strangers
Yeah.
because they're assuming that everybody else will get their vaccines and therefore that disease won't be there anymore. Not only are we seeing more measles this year than we've seen in 20 some years,
Yeah.
but we're going to start seeing natural polio again. We are going to see more H flu disease, pneumococcal disease.
My
I mean,
worry is pertussis because there's a very big movement for like the DTaP vaccine. Like there's certain vaccines that are just getting more of a platform, and DTaP is definitely one of them. And it's concerning. I mean, the
oh,
amount of pertussis, especially in Australia, not only in America, but just because of this movement of not vaccinating.
yeah, and it's terrifying to me. But tie that with drinking unpasteurized milk.
Yeah.
Raw milk. We have the evidence of the danger of doing that. And there are people that are online absolutely protesting, that anyone would complain about raw milk, how much better it is for you and better for your immune system and all of that. And yet they have no idea what the pasteurization process is.
Right.
And somebody actually wrote in that they got raw milk from a farm, they would boil it at home, and then that's what they would drink. Well, yeah, that's
Well,
pasteurizing the milk. And people had no idea that that's what it was. So
exactly. Oh my god.
I just, as long as we're on this topic, I just have to add that I find it incredibly upsetting that people are anti science in
Mhm.
general. And, you know, I'm very well trained. I mean, I went to, a world-class residency, world-class medical school. I got excellent training in my day. And, I keep up with my CME and get, awards up the wazoo on that. So I know that I'm well versed in all of this, but I just cannot believe that somebody without a scientific background can read the insert for a vaccine, which is available online and anybody can read it, and take a line out of that and then make a whole narrative around it about how they understand this. And as pediatricians and doctors, we don't. We're just told by big pharma, you do this and that's why you do it. And I find that beyond offensive. Not that someone does their homework. I applaud that. I think anyone that, has concerns should go and do their research. But Dr. Google is not research. And I think when they find the information, what should be the next step is bringing it to their
Yes,
pediatrician
which
and
we're happy to
saying,
look at. Mhm.
yeah, and say, I'm concerned about this. Can you explain to me why you're not concerned about this? And have a discussion, have a dialogue. And, that would just open up the conversation so much more. But just this assumption with, oh, I read it and I know it and you don't, immediately prevents a conversation from taking place.
And Bubbie, you've probably seen this already, but it's not even so what's happening is that when I joined, vaccine misinformation was there, and it's gotten really bad right now with the current climate we have, unfortunately,
Sure.
politically. But what I was also seeing is a lot of misinformation around sleep choices, like very against sleep training, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, I think me and you both agree that it's something that we love, but we're not forcing on anybody. It's just a good tool to think about. And your prime example of your
Yeah.
son was like, hey, mom, can you come over? And then just so I was starting to see sleep consultants. I started to see physical therapists, speech therapists, people trying to sell their products by putting pediatricians down. And this is a huge red flag for me. If someone
Yep.
comes out and says, hey, here's the problem. Your pediatrician doesn't listen to you. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't have education on this. But guess what? I do. I'm the person you need. Buy my course. That is not a way to sell things in my mind. You should be able to sell a product without having to put somebody else down, is my philosophy. And I
I,
don't mind people selling things. Like this is an economy and you gotta make a living. Fine. I sell courses, but I will never put a peer or someone else down that's educated in their expertise to say, this person doesn't know as much as I do. That's so offensive, I believe, right? Like,
well,
oh,
I
pediatricians are not the expert. Yeah.
Yeah. I got that immediately after Trent's rolling over
Mm.
because I then had a PT go
Oh, I'm
online
sure.
and point out how this was obviously not normal that an 8 day
That
old was rolling over,
your
that,
kid has
he had
CP. Yeah.
he had tension, he had torticollis, he had hypertonia, the list goes on and on. I will tell you, after that video was made, Trent did not roll over again once until he was almost 3 months. So I found that hilarious. And quite frankly, Trent was perfectly healthy, did
Yes.
not have torticollis, did not have hypertonia. And I actually had to do a video saying to everybody, look, guys, I appreciate, people looking out and being concerned about something, but let me tell you what's going on. And I think, well, there's two parts of this. One is exactly what you said. Putting down someone else is particularly making someone doubt that their pediatrician has any experience in evaluating a child's neurologic status, their muscle tone status, their developmental status is just dead wrong because every pediatrician on the planet spends their residency learning all of that. So that's the first part of that. The other part is, and now I forgot what I was going to say, but it was about not putting someone down and
Also, maybe.
making an armchair diagnosis. That
Yes.
was the other part.
Yes.
That the number of people that will comment online about someone else's child, I think is very hurtful. But particularly if somebody is a speech therapist, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, you know, we work with all of those people.
Yes.
We are a team. And if a pediatrician sees a developmental concern or a parent raises a developmental concern, what's going to happen next is they're going to be referred to the right person to
Right.
evaluate that properly. And so I think that it's just so wrong to then be putting down other members of this team because you're the only one that can, solve this problem is so inappropriate and so unfair to parents.
Yeah. And it again divides more than and we're not dividing anybody here. And I mean, in my real life, I wouldn't talk to my peers like that. So I'm not doing that online either. And I love, and I think what I'm seeing also is this culture of finding the balance of needing to intervene and needing to wait it out. And I think you have probably seen this too, that there are some things that just from my experience and my relationship with my families in my office, like, and this goes down to that developmental concern, right? I will say, "Hey, look, I'm liking this. I'm not liking this." But I think when I see a lot of creators in the subspecialties in development online, they over pathologize everything, right? That
Absolutely.
everything is a problem. You got to get this checked out immediately. And I'm not going to say that there are situations where I need to get torticollis checked out. There's situations where I am concerned about this, but I think the beauty that I love to say about being a pediatrician is that we are able to zoom out. Does that mean we miss things sometimes? Yes, but we also, the best pediatricians in my mind, have really good anticipatory guidance and know when to be concerned, when to come back and have that conversation, right? So that I'm not going to miss something. I'm going to say, "Hey, look, I don't love that your child is leaning on this side and I'm seeing some flattening. Can you make sure we do X, Y, and Z? We'll
Right.
reassess." Do I need to send that family to 7 different people right now and all these people? No. I want to have the tools, but I want to also have that balance of like, do we need help? Do we need to wait it out? And that goes for so many things, not just development, but behavior with picky eating. It's like but it also means giving the education. And I think you probably can see that we end up a lot of times people can't see the forest through the trees. They end up just getting so hyper focused on like, this is an issue. This is a problem. If you don't fix it, your child's
Yeah.
not going to walk. If you don't fix the fact that your child's not crawling, they're going to have issues with using a fork down the line. I'm like, what? Like, you just probably saw those patients, but I can tell you that that's not the general population. It may be 1 in 100, but I need you to know that not everyone is dealing with pathology. And I think that's what's happening a lot of.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And again, that's social media.
Yeah.
That it's making every deviation pathological. And I think the area where that is most prominent is in terms of diagnosing autism.
Hmm.
And I think it is so important to stress to parents that normal development is on a spectrum,
Right.
just as autism is on a spectrum. And milestones are there so that they can, milestone checklists, can raise a red flag if a child isn't doing something. And yes, that means you need to keep your eye on it and you need to see whether that's going to, develop over time. But the fact is, if a child is meeting, you know, 90% of milestones, and in fact is ahead, let's say in gross motor, they're walking at 9 months. I mean, the kid is climbing at a year, doing great, but may not be saying words at 15 months. Well, I'd like to see some words at 15 months. But do I think there's a problem waiting just until 18 months to
Right.
see if those words develop and to really give parents tools on how to work
Yes.
with their child, reading to them, asking questions about what they're reading, naming things as they're handing. There are things that can be done in that interim which will not hurt the child. So I think that it is very much a balance. And I think that's what pediatricians are trained to do. But that doesn't mean you ignore if somebody isn't
Right.
meeting a milestone. You certainly have to, mark it, keep it in your head. But I think, as you said, there are things that can be done in the meantime to see if that's going to evolve. And I think with autism, that's the same thing. There are signs that are attributed to autism that are also normal.
Yeah.
And so, what you need to do is see if over time those things kind of drop out and you see different behaviors take their place, and that fits more your typically developing child. or if you see that not only are those behaviors not dropping, but that child is, getting further behind and falling, behind in social aspects, then obviously you think more about autism. And I was asked a question recently online about whether 18 months was too early to diagnose autism. And my answer was really, kind of yes, but because development is on a spectrum.
Right.
And I think, if there are concerns raised, you can, go to speech therapy, go to the therapist, start the therapies. And if those behaviors drop out, okay. If they don't, then you've gained the benefit of intervening early in a child in a way that may help them much more down the road. So I'm never against getting help, but I think I think just being online makes every parent nervous.
Absolutely. And it comes with sleep, it comes with milestones. And to be fair, there are many accounts out there that are not putting pediatricians down. And I encourage you, whenever you're consuming information for our listeners, if you're finding that someone is putting down a professional, whether it's their peers consistently, whether it's another profession like a pediatrician, or a pediatrician putting down PTs all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this is us having a conversation, but like, if you're constantly hearing that messaging in their education, you got to question, is this person really valuable to need to get information from? Because
Yeah.
an educated person that knows their information should not have to put other people down to elevate themselves. This is like human communication 101, right? Like, I do not
I
want to
think that,
listen
yeah,
I don't want to
that's
listen
a
to
great
anybody
point.
who keeps putting people down. Like, and I used to, when I joined social media, I had way more people that I followed, right, in the space. And then when I started to see repetitive behaviors of these people putting down pediatricians, unfollow, because I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, you have every ability to
Yeah.
get this message across without putting us down. Are we experts in everything? Absolutely not. But we do know many things, and we have gotten trained. And I want to put that to the point that we learn things in residency, but so much of what I've learned is also in practice, right?
Oh,
Seeing hundreds
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
hundreds of patients over, for me, 10 years, you 40 plus. I mean, the amount of experience we've had troubleshooting with families, right? Looking at, I waited too long with this kid. Maybe this, I'm going to look out for this. Like, I've learned so much just by experiencing that ride with my families. And that's why it's called practicing medicine. And so when I get very defensive when people insult our profession, because
I,
no, 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 no. We are not some dumb people that sit around and do nothing. We went through training, and like you said, we continue to learn. The best pediatricians are always doing that CME, that continuing medical education, which for me, I do all the developmental stuff. I'm always doing development behavior stuff because that's what I love. And I think it's so valuable. But
yeah.
I love what you just said because it's true. And then my next question, and I would love to talk to you more, but I want to ask you about parenting philosophies because, of course, there has been a rise of all the different labels of parenting, right? Gentle parenting, positive parenting, all this stuff. And I'm sure you've seen them come and go in the last 40 years. A lot of them fall under the umbrella of authoritative parenting, which is setting loving, firm boundaries. What do you make of these parenting styles? And do you feel like this can also confuse people when it comes to discipline and raising children?
Um, yes, but I have to say it's interesting that discipline seems to be a real lightning rod
Mm-hmm.
with parents today. Because look, I didn't hit my kids; that was out of favor when I raised my kids. I certainly don't believe in it.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that for older boomers, they were raised in very authoritarian households where
Yes.
you do it because I
I
say
say so.
so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I understand parents today rebelling against that. They don't want to raise their kids with that feeling. They don't want to ever shame their children or, punish their children in a way that's harmful. So I think that's a really wonderful thing. Um, but it is such a lightning rod because I think parents, as a result, even if they weren't raised in an authoritarian home, I think they very much pivot 180 degrees to do gentle parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost hate that term
Yeah, I know.
because of how misused it is.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I think you should always raise children with empathy and caring, and you want to understand why they're doing what they're doing and to help them deal with their emotions. I think that's the mark of a good parent. I don't think you have to call it, gentle
Yes.
parenting. I think that's just a very caring, warm, empathetic parent. My problem with people that are following gentle parenting is that gentle parenting, when done the way it's intended to be done, is really just a matter of making sure that you connect with your child
Yeah.
and that you really talk to them when they're upset about something, figure out why that upset them and how to better handle that next time. The problem is the way that has been integrated into
Yeah.
most parents today is actually as permissive parenting
Yes. Oh, I was
with,
waiting for that word. I was like,
yeah,
it's gone on another level of not setting boundaries.
yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. They think that saying no to their child is shaming their child and harming their child. And therefore, they they try everything they can to not do that.
Yeah.
And if they finally lose their patience, they feel guilty because they feel like they failed at being a gentle parent. Or what they do is they talk their child to death. When
Yeah.
a child is, when a 2.5-year old is in the midst of a full blown tantrum because you told them no, they, have to, put on their shoes, talking to them reasonably at that moment is not going to work. And true gentle parenting understands that, but I think the way it's interpreted by the majority of parents does not understand that. And
Right.
so I think you have these kids who were raised with no boundaries, no limits. They are not disciplined, and I don't mean in terms of physical discipline, but they're not disciplined in terms of being told, no, we can't do that because it's not safe. We can do this.
Right.
And they just haven't had those boundaries set. And I really fear that we are raising an entire generation of kids that are going to have absolutely no boundaries. And I think grandparents have a really hard time with this because long before gentle parenting was ever, coined as a term, grandparents understood this. And if you
Yeah.
had an empathetic parent, they did sit you down and talk about things. And to see some of these discussions now, I think for some grandparents, they literally roll their eyes and don't know what to do with themselves. Others, I think, really understand that their child as a parent is just trying to show their child empathy and they applaud what they're doing. But if they do it without setting limits, that's not gentle parenting, and that's really hurting the child.
And I love that you brought up that the intent of gentle parenting is legit and it's not anything innovative. It's connection based, curiosity based,
Yeah.
but it's how it's being used, which I think is a big issue. And I see that, and I think it's a lot of it's the term, right? You think gentle means that when a parent hears that, they're not taking it how it's supposed to be and that you still have to set the limit, right?
Yeah.
Most experts in the gentle parenting world will agree that there is
Yes, a
limits,
gentle
but
parenting, there should be
right,
limits.
there
Yeah.
are. But then you're right that so many people hear it and they're so afraid of their kids being upset with boundaries, their kids being upset with whatever, that they don't hold boundaries and they basically allow the child to do as they will. And the other thing that I'm seeing is that the over validation, right? Meaning the validation of
Oh,
feelings, I think is extremely important. Don't get me wrong. But what I saw when I started seeing the gentle parenting movement, when I was online, is that this, by over validating, I'm seeing a lot of kids that you can't spend the whole 10 minutes with them on the ground all the time. You
no.
have other children. You can validate but also move things along. And I think sometimes gentle parenting advice that I hear from legit gentle parenting experts are like, you got to validate, sit the whole time, time it in. And I'm like, that works in theory. I'm not denying that, but you may not be able to have a kumbaya moment every time. How are we going to move along? And why I say this is that I'm worried that we're raising kids that in an effort to keep them connected during dysregulation, we are also raising kids that don't know how to help them, how to rescue themselves as well. Like that
Yeah.
sometimes You can have the connection with mommy, and mommy's going to help you. Mommy's not going anywhere, but you're having a moment, and I need to just go into the kitchen and take care of something, and I'm going to come check in on you. You're not alone. You can come with me. You can move on to something else that feels good to you, but we may not be able to have the kumbaya every time you're upset, and that's not bad parenting.
Well, I agree with you. And I think it actually goes a step further.
Mhm.
I think that parents that are totally into what they believe is gentle parenting and validating their kids' feelings, they feel that that takes precedence over everything else.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I think you have to be sensitive to the environment that you're in. If you are a child, if you're on an airplane, you're in a confined space. So
Right.
you literally can't, there's nothing that you can really do there. Hey, people on the plane have to understand you're doing your best to keep your child occupied and happy, but it's a horrible environment. It's a
Yeah.
scary environment. You're in a closed space. Kids are going to cry. They're going to scream. They're going to be having a tantrum. And I think everybody on the plane needs to understand that. That can't be helped. But if you're in a restaurant and people are there trying to have a nice meal, or you're in a movie theater and people, are trying to watch a movie and your child is acting out, well, it's nice that you want to validate your child's feelings, that you're not going to buy them more,
Yeah.
popcorn. But I think what you need to do in that situation is remove your child. And
Yes.
that doesn't mean that, you should, fear what other people think or what other people say. But I think that you have to understand that you need to do what you need to do for your child, but you also have to be aware of how it's affecting other people.
Absolutely. And I had recently posted a video of like my son loves to dance at restaurants, right? And I allow him to dance at restaurants when he's not going to knock someone else's glass down, right? Like I'm not going to let him dance next to a table that's trying to enjoy their dinner, but if there's an empty area, I'll let him dance.
Absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
use that example because I love my kids being kids, right? He likes to move his body, but I also think that we should respect, again, at a dining experience, right? Now, if we're at a playground and everyone's running around, then that's a different story. But that's when it comes down to allowing kids to be kids, but also respecting the fact that we are human beings in a world. And would you want someone knocking down your water glass that you spent, you're there for an experience and now a kid is knocking it down
Yeah.
and a child isn't or a parent isn't disciplining that. And by discipline, let's remember, it's not punishment, it's teaching. Hey,
Right.
Ryan, when we're in a restaurant, we can't dance next to someone who has a water glass there. So let's come over here. No punishment needed. I'm teaching him how to be a human being because that is what parenting is, right? And that's not interfering with being a kid. That's just human nature. I mean, we got to do that. And I think you're right. I think a lot of parents forget that we can have that balance of raising a kid, allowing them to be children, but also respecting the fact that there's a time and a place and you need to make that parent moment decision on what are you going to do right now? Are you going to let them have the tantrum here? Are you going to let them kick everybody, around, or are you going to take it to a corner and talk to them and do the connection that we're talking about and de-escalate and move forward? Oh, this is such a great conversation. Like I said, I could talk to you for hours. Most of my guests that come on, I'm like, let's just do our own podcast together. Like these are great conversations we're happening. So I guess my last question for you is, trends come and go, but some truths very much endure. So if you could pass along one lesson from your years in practice that you believe will always matter in raising healthy, grounded kids, what would that be?
Well, I think we've alluded to it a bunch of times. I think it's being very empathetic to your child. I think growing up is hard.
Yeah,
Every day there's a million new things being thrown at a child, and they're integrating all of that and they're learning how to function in the world. And I think just the more support and love that you can give them, the unconditional love is what's most important for every child. And if you raise your child in a loving home where they know you love them, they know you care about them, that child's going to do okay, because that's the most important thing.
I love that. That unconditional love piece is that one phrase that I just always love to hear. Bubbie, thank you so much. This was such an amazing conversation. Okay, so where can people go to stay connected, see your videos, see your explanations when people call you old school because you're not? Like I need where can they go to stay connected?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm Ask Bubbie, Bubbie, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok, and there will be a book coming out sometime, hopefully in the next year.
I'm so glad, and I want you to come on when that book comes out. We already hashed out so many things here, but I cannot wait to dive deeper into maybe some ideas that we did not discuss today so that we can get that book into more hands. Your wisdom, thank you. As I always say, I look up to all of my colleagues, especially those that have more experience than I do, and you are one of those people. So although we are peers in the social media space, I do love to learn from you, as I love to learn from all of my colleagues. So thank you so much for all the years of service to the pediatric world and what you're doing online.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
And for everyone tuning in today, I'm sure you enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure you took home some really tangible tips on really reframing how you're parenting as a modern parent. If you love this conversation, remember the 3 rules. You got to share it, you got to subscribe to the channel, and you got to give this video a thumbs up sign so we can continue to bring you amazing conversations. And of course, Bubbie back on the show in the future. Have a great rest of your day and stay well.